Welcome back to Showtime at the Senate, everyone. I'm your host today. My name is Nick Baldwin, and today we have a very special guest. Author Jonathan Lethem is calling in from California. He's an award-winning novelist and essayist known for writing such novels as Motherless Brooklyn and The Fortress of Solitude. And today we're going to talk about John Carpenter's 1988 film They Live. And in 2010, he released a film critique book about They Live. It was part of a series called Deep Focus, a novel approach to cinema. And I read the book, and I got a hold of Jonathan, and I wanted to talk to him about it because it seemed like he had a lot of good insight on the film and a lot of personal experience with the film. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So,
Glad you guys are screening the movie.
Yeah, we're screening the movie. It's one of my favorite movies, and John Carpenter is one of my favorite filmmakers. So I wanted to start with how you came to write this book. Was it sort of, did you go to the publishers and say, I want to write this piece about They Live, or were you approached to write a piece on any film in general, and you wanted to write about They Live? How did that go?
Yeah, the editor of that series, Deep Focus, Sean Howe, was looking for a kind of I guess you'd say like a kind of a down and dirty alternative to the BFI film series, which writes about very canonical films, one author and one film in those little books. And so it was an attempt to extend that same idea of essays by writers about films, but to take it, sort of off the highbrow shelf and into the, popular and cult mainstream, where a lot of people's guilty pleasures or favorite films that they saw in a movie theater as opposed to seeing in a repertory house, or just cult objects like They Live. And so the minute he suggested to me that I might write about some film for this series, I basically instantly had it narrowed down to two or three possibilities. Existence by David Cronenberg, or Monty Hellman's Two Lane Blacktop, or They Live. And I concluded pretty quickly that the one that I had the most actually to say about, as opposed to just sort of wanting to jump up and down about and be associated with, was They Live, because it's such a simple film in a way, but it has so many different kinds of weird ideologies and just weird stories associated with it.
Yeah.
It seemed to me like it would be incredibly fun to write about.
Yeah, it's a movie that has a lot to say, for sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about the first time you saw the film. What was that like? What was your first impression?
Well, I watched it on a VHS tape. My friend Bruno, who's alert anarchist political thinker, had gotten wind that there was something cool about it, and we hadn't seen it in the theater. In its first run, it actually won the weekend, the weekend it was released, but it very quickly closed too. So I didn't know about it in time, even though I was sort of a John Carpenter fan already. And so I was at Bruno's house in Oakland, and he popped the VHS tape in, and we were hanging out, and it had no warning at all. It wasn't like the internet era where you've been shown 1,000 clips or given a million hints and teases and and critiques. I went in totally cold, which is designed to work. I was like watching a film about homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
and then he put on the glasses. It was really great.
So that's your first impression. How has your impression changed over time, having seen it and studied it?
Well, the thing about They Live that is so fascinating and so resilient is that it has it is sort of like a blunt force instrument. It's not Blade Runner. It's not one of these ambiguous science fiction stories that you can interpret a lot of different ways. It really has one big thing it wants to do to you. And what's amazing is how efficient a machine it is. It hits you over the head with it. It makes you laugh. It makes you angry, and it does it perfectly well. And I think there's something economical and something aggressive and something, it's like a good punk rock song or something.
Right.
It never stops working. I still see it and I get excited, and especially if I'm watching it with an audience of other people who I know haven't seen it yet. I get so excited about the way it's going to, deliver its punch. And it still makes me laugh too. It's still really funny. So I think of it as a, almost like a pop song.
Interesting.
There are times when I don't want to hear the song because I think I know it so well. But in fact, if it comes on the radio again, I get really excited. I shout along with it, and that's sort of how I feel about They Live. I shout along with it.
Right. So about how funny the script is, and it is pretty hilarious. The screenplay is written by Frank Armitage. So tell me who Frank Armitage is.
Well, that's a pseudonym for Carpenter.
Right.
And the name comes from Armitage is a reference to a story by H.P. Lovecraft.
Okay.
So, which helps explain the origin of the image, the basic idea, and it just gives you also a sense of Carpenter's sense of fun, but also his sense of connection to a tradition, right? Of like just paranoid, monster movies and horror stories like Lovecraft wrote. He's someone who takes his energy from his sense of playful, affectionate connection to these things. He's not trying to reinvent the wheel exactly. He's trying to replenish these basic motifs. I mean, I really think that They Live is like a riff. It's like a riff on, the same way a lot of great, rock and roll, when you boil it down, it's those same three chords over again.
Right.
You can hear the fundamental riff working under the surface. It's connected to H.P. Lovecraft. It's connected to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's connected to a whole bunch of other monster movies from the 50s, and also to the Cold War paranoid thrillers, and it's very much participating in a tradition.
I feel like it's an extended Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's very, very much akin to a Twilight Zone episode, and including the blunt allegorical power, the unembarrassed political message.
So about that, I'm 31 years old. I was born in 1988, the year that the film was released. So
oh, really?
I don't really have a great understanding of what the 80s were like as far as a political climate goes, and this is obviously an extremely political film, and is a response to Reaganomics and that sort of thing. So could you sort of paint us a picture of what this was like in the 80s and how there was what the response was to the film?
Well, I think the thing to understand about the 80s is that the onset of Reaganism, which is what the film is, centrally, it's the current event the film is interested in. There's sort of eternal issues of rich and poor, weak and strong, but the current events that the film was occupied with, it was kind of like the invention of where we are now. It was the beginning of the world we find ourselves in at the moment, where, a combination of really, really gross disparity between economic conditions for rich and poor, and the exploitation of the idea that America is has a meaningful middle class, that there's a chance to climb up the ladder, that that the game isn't rigged. This was fresh at the time. It was in the the 70s that the last waning days of kind of the what would you call it, like the New Deal consensus were fragmenting, and they're fragmenting in all kinds of ways. And I don't want to try to do like a pocket political history of the United States or anything, but when Reagan came along, the combination of deceptive media, the combination of like Hollywood aesthetics, Madison Avenue sales methodology, and this unembarrassed triumphalist rich people are better than the rest of us kind of like economic reality, it was still raw. And people were watching it be invented. And this film is about watching it being put together. Well, that's the world we live in now. You know, that's sort of what we've lived with. And whether it's been Democratic or Republican administrations since that time, somehow Reaganism has never really been pushed back against effectively. And we've seen like grosser and grosser versions of it.
Right.
And so this is really a story. If you look at this film as like a political historical object, it's really about the beginning of where we are now, you know, and it's a response of outrage, like, hey, you know, wanting to shake people by the collar and say, can't you see what's being set up here?
Right. That's interesting. And I've been thinking a lot recently about how the film would differ if it was made in a different, basically during different administrations, and especially now during the Trump administration. If John Carpenter were to make that movie now, how would it be different? I think, especially the point of view as far as that television is the major reason and the major source of control over the population. I kind of feel like that would be different now because it's you know, not everyone has cable like the same way that they used to. I don't have it personally.
Right.
I only stream things.
Right.
And I don't know. Maybe it would be on Facebook. Maybe the aliens would be at the head of Facebook or on Instagram or something like that. What do you think?
Yeah, of course they'd have flocked to it, you know, instantly. They would have gravitated to it. It's a perfect vehicle. But the thing is, you know, to look at it a little more broadly, like a kind of almost like a Marshall McLuhan sort of vision. In a way, looking at screens is, you know, our computers, our phones, Facebook, cable television, the 3 networks, you know, at the time They Live was made, we still had a really predominant, you know, there was like NBC, ABC, and CBS kind of view of things. And then suddenly there was MTV and CNN. But it was still this idea that there would be a few centralized networks. Okay, so now we have, you know, Facebook versus Twitter or Google. But it's really not that different. And the capacity of these giant corporations that basically make entrancing screen objects for us to contend with, it's really almost exactly the same thing.
Certainly. All right. So somebody I wanted to talk about with you, who I think is an extremely interesting character in this film, but underrated or underanalyzed, however you want to put it, is the blind preacher.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like it's extremely interesting that this movie is about seeing the truth with your own eyes. You put the glasses on and you now see what the world is really like. And we have this blind preacher who is obviously faith-driven. So I don't know. I just wanted to get your thoughts on him. And basically, how do you think that he was convinced of this plot against the world if he's unable to see it?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Yeah, it's like he's like Daredevil from the Marvel comics. He has like an increased sense organs because some kind of intuition-based capacity to. But you know, of course, the story has these really archetypal elements, and it's very mythic. You know, the idea that there's that only the blind can see, or that, you know, also, you know, the fact is, when they put on the glasses the first time, they see in black and white, you know, and it gives you a headache. There's this idea that, like, the truth hurts.
The truth hurts, right.
It's if you think about it from a really radical perspective of, like, what would it take to break the capitalist consumer spell that we're all complicit with, you know? I mean, like, I like watching Netflix. I like, you know, I like to be I like to drink the Kool-Aid. It feels good. It's fun. It's fun on a daily basis. So what would it take to, like, break yourself out of the, you know, the trance?
That's a good point.
Well, so the blind preacher has this sort of strange advantage, right? He's not susceptible. But, right, how does he know the difference between, you know, maybe...
Jonathan, you cut out there.
Oh, did we lose it?
Oh,
Or are you there?
You're back. I can hear you again.
Oh, good. Great. So yeah, there's almost like this suggestion that he has some sort of spiritual sensitivity to them, or that it's like there's an uncanny range in which you can detect the truth. One of the things that's interesting about the film is it's so much about contemporary events. There are jokes about Reaganism. It's very much like exactly of its moment. And in another level, there are all these gestures towards some sort of eternal battle between good and evil. When they're in the hotel room and they're talking about power in its raw form, and Nada says to his friend that his father used to beat him with a strap when he was young, and they talk about these sort of eternal imbalances of weak and strong. I mean, that's really not about Reagan or about consumer capitalism at that point. It's reaching to some sort of slightly more mythic or spiritual anxiety about power, weak and strong, abuse, and that's also where the H.P. Lovecraft comes in. It's like the idea that somehow we've always been controlled, or we've always been susceptible to corruption by these outside forces. That evil is like an alien virus that travels through human history.
That's interesting. And they kind of said that what's the character's name? The Drifter. The Drifter kind of touches on that a little bit.
Absolutely, Drifter's cynical because he says, "Why do you think you're going to change this? This is an eternal." Right. Human situation, which is, it's one of the things that you get with like right wing ideologues who quote Ayn Rand. They think they know that there's some sort of larger archetypal kind of dynamic where the strong must always prey on the weak. So it's just a matter of identifying what your position is going to be in that, in that system.
That's interesting. Well, Jonathan, I really appreciate you coming on the show with me and talking to me about They Live.
Oh, sure. Have a great time with it.
No problem.
It's always a good time to screen.
Oh,
see you later.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, take care.
Bye. Jonathan Lethem, everybody. So our screening of They Live is coming up on March 28th, Saturday at 8 p.m. at the Senate Theater. Tickets are $5. That's basically all their info there's for it. I appreciate you checking out Showtime at the Senate, and we'll see you at the Senate Theater next time.